My name is Daniel, and I'm going to talk about the instruction for the Crazy Traits experiment. The Crazy Trait experiment is designed to teach students about heredity, and it teaches the basic concepts about how traits are passed on from parents to offspring by using these crazy kits. Before starting the demonstration, the students should be introduced to terms they are not yet familiar with. Write these up on the board: heredity, gene, dominant allele, recessive allele, allele. Ask the students to list some physical characteristics that vary between people. Explain that these are known as traits. They can include hair color, eye color, height, and so on. Ask students for certain examples and take a poll through the classroom to see who has different traits. Explain that the process of parents passing down traits to their offspring is known as heredity, and that parents can pass down different versions of the same trait to their offspring, which is why we don't all look alike, and even siblings who have the same parents end up looking different. Next, ask why we look different from our parents and siblings. This is what the experiment will explore by studying the process of how traits are passed down from parents to offspring. This is known as heredity. Give a brief introduction to Mendel, saying that he was known as the father of heredity. Explain how he experimented with peas by crossing peas with different characteristics to observe which traits were passed down to offspring. Mendel gave us the basic understanding of how the process of heredity works, and the concepts that he introduced are still used today. Mendel discovered that some traits were passed to offspring more often than others. The process for why this happens is now explained through DNA. The basic unit of heredity is a region of DNA known as a gene, which codes for a trait. Different forms of the same genes are alleles. Each parent passes one allele for a gene to their child, and the combination of alleles is known as genotype. How the genotype is manifest in physical characteristics is the phenotype. Alleles that are dominant are the ones that are translated in phenotype, even if a copy of the other allele is present. The hidden allele is termed recessive. For an example, if an organism has an allele for brown eyes and an allele for blue eyes, their eye color will be brown because brown is dominant. Recessive alleles must be present in duplicate to be manifest. Now it's time to introduce the students to the mother and father crazies. Both the mother and the father are heterozygous for all of their traits, meaning that they have one dominant allele, a capital T, and one recessive allele, a lowercase t, for every single trait. Explain to the students that they will all be creating offspring from the same set of parents. The first part of the process is sex determination, and this is done through the sex chromosome coins. The male sex chromosome coin has an X chromosome on one side and a Y chromosome on the other side, while the female sex chromosome coin has an X on both sides of the coin. So what the students do is they first flip the male coin, which represents the sex chromosome passed down by the father, and record what they got, either an X or a Y. And then any way they flip the mother's sex chromosome, they'll get an X. And they record the combination of sex chromosomes that they got. So if they got an X and a Y, they're going to build a male crazy. If they got an X and an X, they will end up with a female crazy. The students will go through basically the same process for the remaining list of traits that they have. For each trait, they will be required to flip two coins. The green coin is the sperm coin, that it represents the allele passed on by the male. And since the male is heterozygous, has a big T on one side and a little t on the other side, representing the dominant and the recessive alleles. The female coin is the same. This is the egg coin, the blue coin, and it also has a capital T and a lowercase t. So for each trait, the students will flip both coins and record the combinations that they got so that they can determine the phenotype for that particular trait from the genotype. To help students visualize the process, draw a Punnett square on the board. Show them how the Punnett square helps predict the probability of phenotypes that can result in offspring when the parental genotypes are known. After the students have recorded the allele combinations for each trait, they should use the key of genotypes and phenotypes to determine what variant their crazy has. For example, a crazy who is capital T for skin color is red, capital T lowercase t is purple, and lowercase t is blue. Make sure students are filling in the table correctly. Now that the phenotypes have been determined, it's time for the students to actually build their creatures. Refer to these placemats to determine which parts are meant for which body type, and refer to the leader manual in order to determine how to put the pieces together in the proper order. Females are differentiated from males by the fact that the round part of the female is on top, while the pointed part of the male's body is closer to the head. After all the creatures have been built, ask students why no two are exactly alike. They're from the same parents, so isn't there a possibility that the same offspring could have been produced? As with human siblings, parents pass on so many traits that it is unlikely that two offspring are given the same exact combinations of alleles, except in identical twins. With 13 traits, it is highly unlikely that any crazies will get the same exact allelic combinations from their parents. Take a poll to see how many of the students had male or female crazies. Explain that, even though a 50-50 split would be expected, it does not mean that there is a 100% chance that such a division will occur. Have the students go through the key to determine the dominance relationships for each trait. This is done by looking at the heterozygote in relation for each trait. The heterozygote expresses a certain phenotype, and that phenotype represents the dominant allele, while the other one is recessive. For example, for the characteristic of beak shape, the heterozygote expresses the trumpet phenotype and not the crusher phenotype. This means that trumpet is dominant while crusher is recessive. 3 traits are not simply dominant recessive. Skin color shows incomplete dominance. The heterozygote is a mix of the 2 alleles. So red and blue, the heterozygote is purple, meaning one is not dominant to the other. Eye color is codominant. The heterozygote shows 2 distinct phenotypes, with no blending as in skin color. Instead, the heterozygote has 1 red eye and 1 green eye. The tail is also an example of incomplete dominance. The demonstration with the crazies is now complete, so have the students take apart the creatures that they built. Have them use the placemats to make sure that they have all of the parts that they started with before they put all the pieces back into the kit. If there's still time, there's an additional demonstration that can be done, and this is with the PTC test strips. Hand these out to all the students and ask them to taste them by placing them on the tongue. Then take a poll to see how many of the students could detect a bitter taste from the strip, while how many students could taste nothing whatsoever. Explain that this trait is passed down through genetic means, and that the ability to taste the PTC test strip is a dominant trait, while the ability to not taste it is recessive. That's the whole experiment. Just make sure to review all the major vocab terms and concepts with the students before you go, and have a good lesson.